Oh, on. Not on? It's on, okay. Can everybody hear me? That's more important. Thank you so much for coming to see this talk in the middle of the day. I really appreciate it. I know some people came driving a while, and some people are, looking at their watch because it's lunchtime and so forth. So thanks for that. I'm going to go, this is a two-part adventure today, so I'm going to go sort of quickly through the images and talk, and then we have a mini field trip down the hall on the other side of the bathrooms, so a short field trip, and then you'll be able to see what I've been actually doing here. So what I'm showing you now is the lead up to me getting here and the past few years and what I've been thinking about, and then our field trip will reveal what's gone on so far with me. The first thing I would say is it's hard to, I hate having a label put on me, but it is helpful to categorize people, especially around scientists. But anyway, so I sort of just combined the two things I've loved my whole life, which is nature and making art. And for a long time, those two things were separate. And in the last 10 years, they've become merged together so that my artwork has become about the environment and working with the environment, both content-wise and also material-wise. This is me. Got to start off with a self-portrait. I grew up in Maryland. I'm not going to do my whole biography, don't worry. I grew up in Maryland and blah, blah, blah. I went to Ohio State. I went to school at Alfred in New York. And then I had the freedom after graduate school to move anywhere. And I moved out to the Pacific Northwest. And I had chosen that because starting in 1986, I was driving out to Seattle for some other art things going on there. And I came through Montana. And it's always been such an amazing place to me. And when I found out about this residency, I really wanted to come back here because now it's been 39 years since I first came here. And when I drove here, I was thinking about the lens of what my memories were. So the work that I've been doing here is also about my memories and about place and about me and the place, and also how the place is defined by the native plants that are here. So I always loved trees, and I think one of the most important things all along has been that I look at things with through firsthand observation. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. I feel like I'm coming and going out of the mic, not the room. All right. Thank you. All right, I'll speed up here. This is a watercolor, and this is an oak tree, an actual oak tree that I drew firsthand observation, and I researched all of the bird and butterfly species that this old oak tree would have seen at that location over its whole lifetime. And so I took a rubber stamp, and the rubber stamp are, all of the correspond to different species, and help visualize that. So I've been thinking very much about how everything works together instead of just focusing like on the one big tree that you can't miss in the Cascades. So these are, this is just a list of different species of birds and butterflies that this tree on Lake Ontario, where I've done a lot of work, what it would see in its life. So I'm from Syracuse, New York, and we have Onondaga Lake in our presence. And when I first moved to Syracuse 25 years ago from Seattle, I looked at a map and I'm like, Oh, cool. Here's Syracuse, and I sort of live like right here, and there's this 5-mile long lake with a park along the side of it. Awesome. And so I went there, and it was disgusting. It smelled bad, there were dead fish, and it was a very sick lake, which even a novice not thinking about anything could tell just using your nose and looking at the fish on the shore. In the time that I've lived there, this became a Superfund site, and so I've seen them clean up the lake, which is supposedly finished now, and that's been really interesting. It's hard to sort of like wrap your head around this, but the one positive thing about that is that the lake is basically undeveloped because it was so gross for so long. You can walk almost entirely around the entire lake, and it's all public land. So I've spent quite a lot of time going there, and I had this amazing experience walking my dog Flora, who, rest in peace, Flora. I was walking along there, and two things happened sort of like in the same time period, which was before this was declared a Superfund site. I was finding these shards of ceramics just like emerging from the ground in the spring, and they're like, you look in the water and you could see them with the rocks and stuff, and it turns out that they were using that section of the lake as a landfill and throwing Syracuse China Company, when something broke in the process of it being made, they would just throw it there. And I had started collecting them, and I've collected like 500 pounds of them over like 10 years. And I didn't know why. At first I did it because I'm like, oh, they're not that sharp really, because they're eroded and they've been there since the 50s, most of them. But I ended up using them as an art material, but I was first collecting them just because, I don't know why you could, like as a stewardship kind of thing. In the meantime of collecting those, and of course, like the place where they are is the farthest spot from the parking lot. So you have to walk 2 miles, like with this backpack full of these like broken pieces of ceramic that I don't know why I'm collecting them. And I was walking along the shore, and I see this bird, and I've turned into like a total bird lover and fanatic about it, I guess. And I looked up in this tree, and it was this like moment where I was connected to this one bird. Like I didn't know what it was. It was this small like gray drab bird, blue-gray gnatcatcher, I finally figured out. And I just was like, what is that? Like I had this moment of connection with nature in a way that like was very transformative to me. So I went and bought the Sibley book, and I looked through like every page, like where is this bird? Because it's so drab, I couldn't figure out what it was, and it's like not a warbler or whatever. It has an eye ring. So those two things together like really sort of propelled me. And it was very slow over time. I totally changed my practice a while ago to merge the two things together like I was talking about. So I started using eBird a lot, and I've submitted like 1,000, 2 or 4 hour long checklists from the lake at all different points around it. So this is a Chincolay lithography and screen print combo special. This is 30 inch by 40 inch, so it's pretty large. The lithostone was very large to make this. This is a ruddy turnstone. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is raise awareness at the lake through birding, because other bird fanatics want to see like species. So this is like an unusual shorebird species to have passed through. And I have about 250 species I found at Onondaga Lake. And in the meantime, I became very aware also about the human history there, not just the industrial history, but like the Onondaga Nation history there. It's the birthplace of democracy is actually at Onondaga Lake, which is pretty amazing. And etc. I have to say etc. just so I can not take too much time. This is a charcoal drawing. It looks very beautiful when you see it in person. It looks very grainy here to me, but I shouldn't even say that out loud to you. But anyway, then everybody's like, yeah, it is pretty grainy. This is a representation of me thinking about like the water, the Onondaga Creek, there's several creeks that feed Onondaga Lake. And I was thinking about the community along the water that fed the lake, in addition to the birds and the native plants and non-native plants. It's been being taken over by Japanese knotweed right now along the lake. So the thinking about community in this integrated way is sort of unifies my work also. This was during COVID when it very first started. If you look up there, like at the sort of, it's intentionally sort of camouflaged. There's embroidery that says "You Matter." It seemed like at that time period, you were either like caring about like Black Lives Matter or Gray Lives Matter, like it's like this one or the other thing. And in the meantime, a lot of senior citizens at nursing homes, like nobody was even like, they don't matter apparently because nobody's talking, like this whole, it was so weird, like, because I think every life matters. And so I got this idea to get these towels from Salvation Army, and I embroidered them. I bought them, for 99 cents washcloth or whatever. I embroidered "You Matter" and put them back at the just donated them back, just as a way to spread some kind of kindness into the world, so that if somebody bought a towel, the idea was, I specifically wanted them to be things that would be intimate, like in the bathroom. They might not notice it right away. It's not trying to be an art thing. It's just this extension and sort of a community thing. So somebody could get out of the bathtub or whatever and dry themselves off and then see this special note. I won't talk at length about this, but I feel that I really want to be participating actively as a member of my community. And so this was 4 years ago, approximately. And these are women. This is my polling place. And there's sort of like a ghost woman here. So it's more of an anonymous thing, but this idea that you could put yourself in those shoes and just sort of in a recognition that this is an important thing to do. 2 years ago, I got together with 2 of my neighbors, and it was not my idea. I won't claim that. My friend Betty wanted to start this neighborhood thing. So we got together, and we got everywhere there's a ladybug. We had, I think, 13 people that had gardens, and we had an event where everybody opened their garden up for one day, all day, and they could go around to different people's gardens and just see, because a lot of people in the city, I live right in the city, a lot of the gardens are really great in the back in particular, that you don't get to enter that kind of private space. And so I participated in that, and we handed out these posters. So the posters were printed like 12 by 18, and so people could walk around and go to the different gardens and talk to people. And I lived there at 1408, where all the ladybugs are. So we also had art tents and a food truck, so that we were trying to get more people that weren't maybe necessarily like totally about gardening, but what we really wanted to do was like spread the word about sustainability and native plants. Oh, and we also had a bunch of us have our yards certified by the National Wildlife Federation. which is a cool thing. I've transformed I have 60 plus native plants in my backyard, and I've like removed everything that's not a native plant. And so I've learned a lot doing that. So I have mostly shrubs and perennial flowers. I don't really have a lot of room to plant trees in my yard. And I've been slowly getting rid of lawn. We invited politicians. He came. This is our county executive. When in Onondaga County, he holds some big purse strings. And we were advocating for planting native plants on county property, like along Onondaga Lake, for example, and trying to give tips like, well, if you plant native plants, you don't have to water, you know, like they're gonna grow even through drought, all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. This is me winning an award because I wrote an article about two. I don't know why I'm showing this. I'm proud of it. That's why. I witnessed at my local historic cemetery where I walk my dog every day, chipping sparrow and clay-colored sparrows mating, which are two different species mating. So it was sort of notable. So I went for about 6 weeks every day, and the birds were totally used to me, and I sat on this tombstone and I watched every morning, and I took photos, and I made notes, and I documented that, and I turned it in, I submitted it to the New York State Ornithological Association journal, and it got accepted, which is cool because I'm not a scientist. But I'm partly showing this also because my approach is to like be knowledgeable about what I'm doing, not just be a random interpreter. I want to really know what I'm looking at and sort of the meaning behind things. So I also won an award, the Best Journal Article of the Year award for that article. Oh, and I got it during COVID. So normally they have this big banquet, but they said I could invite 8 friends and we would be able to be out on the deck at Montezuma Wildlife Refuge. So that's what that picture is. You can see the masks. Whoops. All right, so here's another print. These are 2 wood thrush, and I've been paying attention to the wood thrush population in particular at Onondaga Lake, and we've been losing them. Wood thrush are classified as a common bird in steep decline, which is very sad. They have one of the most beautiful bird voices, you know, as many thrushes do. And they made a parking lot. You guys did the opposite thing here. You turned a parking lot into something good, and they did the opposite thing there. And they turned this like fairly small wooded patch that was just big enough to have some breeding pairs into not big enough for anybody anymore. So it's not all fun and games out there. So this is talking about the layered history of place, both human and natural history at Onondaga Lake in particular. These are the shards I picked up that I finally like used after having them for 5 years. I have tons more in my basement. So these are fired, so they're hard, but they're not. They have no glaze, so it has like and they're porcelain, so I have a very fine tooth, and it's really nice for drawing on. And so I drew. All I used was indigo colored pencil, and a little bit of white here and there, as a reference to preciousness of China, you know, like Delft China, even though that's not what this is. And these are they're native plants and a bowl of native seeds here, this wood bowl. And this is hand-spun wool that I crocheted into a very organic kind of doily to sort of present the birds. And then below, this is a tortoise shell. I'm not sure what kind, which represents Onondaga Nation. And this is a library study desk from, it's old, I don't know, it's old, and an old lantern. So it's like giving this sense of history of the two things together. This is when they were destroying the woods for the wood thrush and other species. And so this was also during COVID. Not everything's organized in chronologically here, but which was, there are these big piles. This was the smallest pile of logs of the trees that they were cutting down. There were all these huge piles. And it made me very sad. And I went back several times with orange spray paint, and I spray painted the ends of all of the logs as a sort of protest kind of, or to call attention to what was happening. And not small. Then they mulched them. And I went back. This is where all the Japanese knotwood has now moved in, which was not there at all. I looked through this pile to try to find any little shred of orange paint. And this is how much I found after looking through that whole pile. And so I'm presenting this as this relic of the lost woods. And I'm going to skip. That's me with these books that I made. They're sort of like flip books, and they're all images of birds that I took myself. Like whenever I draw something, it's always from my own photographs, not somebody else's photographs. And I was walking around at the opening talking about different birds, and I could hand these out and people could flip through them and see different images of the birds and read about. These are color coded for like what's threatened or doing fine or whatever. So it's not all bad news, it's just information. Although there's bad news, obviously. This, I'm trying to speed up a little bit more. This is plastic that I collected at Lake Ontario, washed up beach plastic. The place on Lake Ontario that I go to is the southeast section, and the prevailing wind comes from the northwest, especially over the winter, and pushes a lot of plastic in this particularly nice place called Sandy Pond, which has like it's a special area designation. And so I collect every spring. The only way that you can get there is by kayak. So I kayak out with my backpack in these big plastic bags and collect plastic. And once again, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And then I made these birds out of it eventually. So this is a bald eagle with a bleach bottle, the top of a bleach bottle, and the eye is like the neck. And there's a fishing bobber in there. And the feathers and the beautiful white thing are all tampon applicators. Collecting all that plastic, I hate plastic so much. It smells bad. I just like hate everything about it. The whole life cycle of it, I hate. Anyway, so I did this project where I studied them intensely and then made an exact replica hand carving wood that's reclaimed wood out of whatever. So these are like a piece of cherry or whatever. And the idea here is, I called it shoreline restoration. So I would remove something bad and replace it with something good. And literally I put those back in the environment. I have a show and people get to see it and I can talk about it. Yes, they are hard to cast off. But the idea is that by spending 2 weeks carving something and taking that and recognizing this value of replacement and throwing it into the creek that would then go into Lake Ontario, it could become a home for different whatever, bugs or whatever, algae or whatever, and then break down naturally. So that's what that work is about. This is from an exhibition where I showed them. So I had some of the plastic there. This doesn't show it. I had some sand that you can see microplastic all in this, I mean, it's not micro because you can see it, but very small, little bits. Like it's just like everywhere. Sometimes I would pick up a plastic bottle and it would just shatter. It's just like it's awful. So these are little quilts that I made also. Going fast. This is also recycling some artwork. Once it's been to a gallery, this is in my backyard. I do have some daffodils in this picture. I couldn't get rid of everything. I need daffodils in the springtime in Syracuse. So I drilled holes in it for insects so it could start breaking down faster. That's what those circles are. These are very small embroidered native plants and birds. I'm going fast here. This is a piece of wood that I feel like I collaborated with nature to create this form. This is not my chosen form. This is basically part of like a tree and the like beginnings of the roots. And I carved away all the part that was like the most decayed to get at the core of it. So it sort of like stopped it momentarily from decaying, and I'm presenting that as art, and then that will also go back into the environment at some point. So nature collaboration. It's spalting, which is really cool. All those lines are the spalting. It's a fungus. This is a quilt that I made. These are 3 quilts that go together. They could also be apart. And I think of these as quilts for meditation. They're 2-sided. And this is about wetlands. And so this is an abstraction of not a real wetlands. It's the idea of wetlands as sort of a macro and micro view, depending on like how you see it. So you can look at it and reflect on it and feel like you're looking at something very close up that might be there, or you're out in space looking down and seeing wetlands. So it's about having this kind of conversation with nature through the quilts. This is the back side. Everything is hand stitched. Just like all the wood is hand carved, I try to have a really low carbon footprint also in my work. This is my last slide before we move down the hall for a few minutes. This is another, this is a horseshoe crab survey in Delaware that you take pretty easy, admittedly. You have to take like a 3-hour class and then take a test or whatever, and then you can go do the survey. And I'm really interested in this like symbiotic relationship between shorebirds and horseshoe crabs, in particular along Delaware Bay. And they're both like such amazing species. I mean, the shorebirds come to this particular area in Delaware Bay every year, and forever they've been doing that, because this is also where it's perfect for the horseshoe crabs, because it's not too wavy, even though it's like right off the Atlantic Ocean, and it's shallow and warm, so they can come up and lay their eggs once a year. And so they come up at nighttime and lay their eggs. And we walk along with these like PVC forms, and we count our steps or whatever and put it down, and like how many, what eggs do we see, or how many horseshoe crabs do we see? And we'd spread out along the beach. We unfortunately had a very cold, windy night to do it. But then I also did, this is my last slide. I did a project not related, I mean, it's related, but it was not part of this project, where I spent a week walking back and forth along the lake, advocating for horseshoe crabs, sort of like the way I carried that tray around about the birds, but just talking to people and flipping over the crabs. Like, a lot of people don't want to touch them, but they get very exhausted from breeding and they swim up, and sometimes like they'll get turned upside down and they just struggle and they can't, and all you have to do is just literally flip them back over and then they can get back down to the water. So I just walked back and forth along the beach doing that. So like just this like other kind of gesture of care. So that's it for this part of my talk. So I hope people feel like you have a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys coming. Even if we only take 5 minutes, because I know, Eleanor has her talk directly butting up to us, but my sculpture is down in the room there, and maybe we can go look at it for a few minutes and come back down.